And I'd like to welcome Karen Endsley and Will Rodriguez, the co-hosts of the Skeptic Metaphysicians podcast, to the Consciousness Cafe. And welcome you all. This is a presentation co-hosted with metaphor.ink, which is affiliated with the Consciousness Cafe, but it's a community of writers and aspiring writers for people who want to write in the spirituality and metaphysical genres. So we have people here who can give you comments on the things you've written and things you want to let people listen to and give you criticisms and comments on, and help you market your book once you publish it, and also help you publish when you haven't put anything out yet and you still have that fear. And that's one thing we could probably talk about, is the fear of people associating you with the metaphysical and the spiritual. But I know, being a podcast host as well as a podcast guest, we had Kathy McDaniels on last month talking about podcast guesting, and she's been on the Skeptic Metaphysicians as well. And Kathy has booked 104 podcast guest appearances, and Karen, you and Will have had 107 episodes of your podcast.
Not all with Kathy.
Not all with Kathy. So it's cool. And just to get started, I'd like to ask you all to tell people how they can contact you if they were interested in maybe being a guest on your show, or where they could find the Skeptic Metaphysicians, whether it's on, I know you have a YouTube channel, you have Instagram, Facebook, and you're on the different podcast networks. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the easiest place to find us, hands down, is skepticmetaphysician.com. There you can subscribe to the show. We've got we're on Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeart, all the podcast platforms, like you said. We're also on all of our social media outlets. We're on them. I think all of them except for like Tumblr or something like that. But Skeptic Metaphysician really is a connection for everything. It's a great gateway for everything. You can see the videos there, or link to the YouTube. Really, our audience it's in the audio space. We do have a YouTube channel, but we don't really do the show for video. That's an afterthought for us. But our audio is really where our bread and butter is.
Okay, great. And I'll put links to those different social media platforms down in the on the events page when we put that up on YouTube. We should have that up overnight tonight, so it should be up tomorrow morning. And you folks are working on a new podcast too that I think is going to break tomorrow morning as well. It's on psychic frauds and warning signs. But we can't access it tonight. So if we got all excited listening to your podcast and said, I want to find out what's going on, you have to wait until 9 o'clock tomorrow.
We put it up as a teaser. Yeah, absolutely. But on the video side, the audio will launch at 5 a.m. So anyone that's subscribed to us on the audio side, it's our guest is Corey Mitleid, who is a psychic herself, and she wrote a book actually about how to tell whether the psychic you're reaching out to is real or not. Because as I'm sure you all know, this space is full of charlatans, and one of the things we want to do in our show is help weed that stuff out. Right? We want to raise the vibrations of the planet, and those Miss Cleos out there, we really want to try to get those out of the space as much as possible.
We really want to inform people as much as we can, because especially if you're kind of starting to dip your toe and you dip it into a bad batch, it can ruin the whole experience for you forever. So we're trying to help people avoid that as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool. Well, I know you put a lot of time and effort into this podcast, and I can't imagine how much work it is in addition to your regular jobs. But you've gotten some awards as a result of the work that you've done. So could you talk a little bit about those awards?
Yeah, we have been just so honored. So the Signal Award Podcast Awards, it's their inaugural year, and we were very fortunate. They chose us as a bronze. I guess that's a third place winner in the category of religion and spirituality. But was even greater is that in that category we actually won the Listener's Choice Award.
Yeah.
So we were so excited because that means more to us than anything.
Yeah, it means that people are listening to the show actually care enough to vote for us, right? Because it's a popularity contest in a lot of ways, and for us to beat some of the people that we beat in the category for the listener's choice, it's a huge honor, and we're much rather win the listener's choice than the gold. So we're thrilled.
Yeah, there were some heavy hitters. We for mom and pop podcast, we did pretty well, so we're excited.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, talking about mom and pop, I mean, we were a couple minutes late getting started because of mom and pop, but you all have professional lives as well. So tell us a little bit about your professional backgrounds, because I think you're both on both sides of the camera for video production and hosting and being a talent as well. So could you talk a little bit about that so we get to know you a little better?
Sure. Yeah, my entire career has been in television and film. I worked with NBC and Telemundo for my early part of my career. Left there, created my own production company, and then moved over to Virginia, where we are now, to oversee a regional TV network. We oversee the Virginia content for that. It's actually a national network that we do regional content on. So in all intents and purposes, I'm an executive producer. So I create shows and then I hand them off for other people to run them for me, which is great. It's like the best of all worlds, right? You come up with the idea and then you hand it off. It's perfect.
That's cool.
And he has roped me into his world. I actually was a teacher for a long time, and then I ran a real estate investment company, or I managed one. And then we ended up here. And so I'm one of the people he hands the ideas off to. So I work mostly behind the camera, but I host a cooking show and a travel show, which has been a lot of fun. I've gotten to do some things with the travel show that I never thought I would do. Like recently I went hang gliding, which was very scary, but exciting. And it's something I never thought I would do, but I'm loving it.
Yeah. And we try to mix our professional lives with our passion, which is spirituality, as much as we can. To Karen's point, when she just went hang gliding, for her it was a completely spiritual experience.
It was amazing. It really was. We were a mile up in the sky, and you get to the point where you feel like you're the wind.
Yeah,
and the energy, and it was very spiritual.
Yeah, it wasn't just that she was going, oh God, oh God, oh God.
I know that's what I was thinking. I would be crying like a baby up there, So they'd say, well, where's Mark? Oh yeah, you can hear him. You can't see him, but you can hear him.
I'm certain my prayers were heard because I made it back.
Yeah,
that's cool. So how did you get involved in the spiritual world?
That's a weighty subject. I've been interested in metaphysics for since I was in my 20s, and I'm a lot older than that now. But life gets in the way, right? But it wasn't until COVID hit that I was forced to face the realities of who I actually was versus who I thought I was. And through the course of repeated encounters with someone I didn't like in the mirror, I went to therapy, and then my therapist got me into meditation. And then when I started meditating a bit, I started remembering all of the I don't want to say research, because I was just throwing myself into these things. I wasn't really researching, but I remembered all of my my work, or my explorations, is a better word, in the metaphysics space when I was a younger man. So I started going back to it and found that's the thing that was missing from my life. And in fact, it was a book that threw the damn doors wide open, and it was Conversations with God, a book that I had carried around with me for decades and never bothered to open up until that time period. And I opened it up, and it changed my world completely. A different way of thinking.
Wow. Yeah, he is a different person than he was when we met. We would argue about religion, and he had to prove his point and show me the proof. And whereas for me, it was more I always just knew. And I was raised Catholic, but I also have a degree in anthropology and studied world religions. So I've kind of taken little pieces and bits of everything and kind of crafted my own belief system. And with the books that I've read as well, it's kind of formed who I am. And so once he started getting involved in this, I was like, okay, well, you're turning this corner, great. And I just kind of hopped along for the ride, and we've been doing it together ever since.
So who's the skeptic and who's the metaphysician?
That's a great question, Mark, because when we first started, I was definitely the skeptic.
Yeah.
My thoughts were very much entrenched in the pragmatic mindset, where I wanted to believe, I really wanted to believe, but I can't just offhand say, oh, you're psychic. Oh, tell me more about that. I was more like, oh, you're a psychic. How do you know you're not just making this stuff up in your mind, right?
Yeah.
So I had to ask those questions. Though I wanted to believe, I needed proof. I needed to be able to touch it, feel it, smell it, taste it, whatever. I needed proof. So I launched Skeptic Metaphysicians because I consider myself a metaphysician because I'm interested in it, but I was also a skeptic. Now, fast forward to now 2 years later when we're doing the show. Now, neither one of us really, the Skeptic Metaphysician, we talked about possibly rebranding the show because neither one of us is skeptical anymore. But we decided not to because now it's shifted. We're not the Skeptic Metaphysicians. Our audience is, because our show is really a dive into these things at a base level, Metaphysics 101. So people who are curious about the stuff, but aren't maybe 100% behind it, can explore it in a safe space.
And the nice thing about the dynamic that we have is that will still ask the questions like, how do you know? Were you drinking when this happened? And where I'm more like, oh, what did that feel like?
There you go.
What was your experience like? So we still come from the two separate point of views, even though he's more of a believer now as well. But we're trying to really, I don't know, showcase maybe the point of view of what our audience would answer the questions that they would ask or they would have. I mean,
well, that's cool. And I love the name, because I think it does allow those people who are still unsure and uncertain about metaphysics and the spiritual to get their feet wet and see what's going on. So I really like the name. I think y'all have done a great job with that.
Thank you very much. The interesting thing, the challenge is that sometimes people who are in this space, like we talked about the charlatans, who are tired of being called a charlatan, see the name when we send an invitation to come on the show and they go, oh no, I don't want to have to prove myself to anyone anymore, right? So we have to say, we're not skeptical. This is what the show's about. We're not out to debunk anything. We're actually here to celebrate it in a way that people that are coming from a pragmatic point of view can actually stand behind.
That's cool. That's cool. So Karen, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh boy.
Yes.
How has 107 episodes of the Skeptic Metaphysicians changed your life?
Oh my gosh. I think, gosh, in so many ways, I think that the biggest way for me is it's changed Will so much that it's allowed me to really kind of fully express myself more so than I used to be able to. I used to kind of rein it all in a little bit more because he wasn't of the same mindset. But I mean, I've had so many spiritual experiences in my life and things have happened that I've just always known. I didn't really talk about it too much. And so now with him, I'm able just to really open it all up and let it all flow. And I love that. I feel like I've been able to come into myself a little more.
She's being incredibly humble. She has found that she actually is an angel on this planet. She has wings. This woman is truly one of the best people on this planet. She's the most loving, most amazing, incredible person. And through the course of 107 episodes, we have found it's been, I don't want to say proven, but people who had no, people that didn't know each other, who had no reason to just come out with the information, have confirmed that she is indeed an angelic soul in this physical realm.
Yeah, I was looking like it looks like there's some feathers back on your shoulders, though.
See what I mean?
I don't know. Could be.
It's interesting when we were talking about how people kind of think they're losing their mind a little bit when they're going through these things. And I can kind of understand that a little bit because recently, as I've started to really embrace this potential thing that's happening, like out of the blue, we were interviewing someone, they were talking about angels, and I just started crying. Like I have no idea why, but it just like the tears, and then I started to hyperventilate. It was this weird, crazy thing. And after we, got off the interview, I'm like, oh my God, I'm losing my mind. Will, what's going on? So I understand. It's something when it happens.
Well, you've had experiences like that for other podcasts too. I think you had a lady on recently who's a hypnotist, and she hypnotized you guys.
Yeah.
So you get to do things that most people don't, or may be afraid or a little fearful to do.
Yeah.
How does that affect you after you've been through a few of those?
First of all, thank you, Mark, for being a listener. Really appreciate that. But second, you're right. I think part of the fringe benefits of this job is that we do get to experience things firsthand, and we're doing more and more of that. We went to the harmonic egg, which, if you've not heard about that, it is a big egg made out of wood that you go into, and with harmonics, with audio, music, and light, it heals. And it's a remarkable story. And we got a chance to go in and feel it and experience it for ourselves. And we're going to do a lot more of that because we're, I'm not sure if I should, well, I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag. We're working on a television version of the show where we are actually going to go travel to different things, different experiences, and show and go through them and talk about them from a first person perspective. So it's not just talking heads thinking about, philosophizing about these things. It's actually going out there and experiencing and saying, this is what we felt.
Oh, that's cool. So what else have you experienced in addition to hypnotism?
Well, can I tell them the big news?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So it's been a year. It's been a couple of years. So about 1.5 years ago, Will was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And that's, he's young, and it was obviously something nobody wants to hear. And so we were looking, do we do the surgery, radiation? What do we do? And they said, well, let's just keep an eye on it for now. But if it starts to grow more rapidly, we're going to have to do something about this.
Yeah.
So, we've throughout the podcast, we've talked to so many different people, to healers. We've been in the egg. We've done all of these different things, and everyone's, been just wonderful and sending their healing energy and everything you can imagine. So about, 3 or 4 months ago, he went in for an MRI, and they saw the original spot, and then they saw another spot on the other side. But they said, well, with the MRI, we're not really sure what it is, so we're going to do a targeted biopsy. So then we went in, we did the targeted, when I say we did the targeted biopsy. And we got the results back about a week ago, and it's gone. The cancer is gone.
Oh, that's great.
So,
yeah. And my doctor keeps calling me, trying to cancel my appointment because it's all benign. It's all came back negative. No, I want the doctor to look me in the eye and tell me, where did it go?
Yes.
Oh, no.
And we even got a second opinion. So it wasn't like the first guy just misdiagnosed it. We went to a really, really good doctor for a second opinion. And so I'm like, we are not skeptics anymore, let me tell you, because he didn't do any other treatment at all, like nothing.
Yeah. So that could be a podcast episode for the Skeptic Medical Physicians.
There we go.
Hey, there's an idea. Yeah, but yeah, it's like we said, we've had intuitive healers on, and they've worked on us. We've had energy healers and all kinds of, and everyone we did
work, everything.
Yeah, kinesiology, whatever, muscle testing. We've done all kinds of things, and maybe because of it, maybe that's where the cancer went. But Karen had an incredible experience from breath work, right? The one thing that you wouldn't think would do it, but suddenly, lo and behold, Karen.
No, it was one of those things where, like, yeah, you're breathing,
I
and
do it all the time.
Exactly. How's it going to be any different? And so this wonderful, I guess it's a couple, right, that do this. They're out of Hawaii. And so they offered to do a seminar for us and for any of our audience that wanted to participate. And so we each were in a separate room. We had our laptops on, and he went through this process of breath work. And oh my God, it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was like, just, I don't even know. I mean, I left my body. There's no other way to describe it. I saw myself. So that was not something I expected. But it was very intense. And I would just recommend to anybody to try that. It was warrior breath work, which is a very rapid pace, deep breath that's you sustain that for about 30 minutes. And at first I thought, well, I'm not gonna be able to, that's gonna be too tiring, but your body just kind of sinks into it, and then it starts releasing all the chemicals, and it was incredible.
Right. So here comes the skeptic in me, right? I'm thinking anyone who hyperventilates as much is going to have an out-of-body experience, right?
Oh no.
But this was a little bit more than that. She actually saw herself from above, which is interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. I had heard something similar to that with holotropic breath work. And there's a guy in North Carolina, in Mebane, North Carolina, who has a center where he does that. But I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think that's one of the results that you can get from breath work.
Yeah, it's pretty astounding.
It really was.
Yeah. So we're talking about podcasting with these this month and last month's shows. And we talked about being a podcast guest and being a podcast host. For someone, and I'll ask y'all, either one can pop in, for someone who has just written a book or wants to get out and talk about their experiences, which would be a better way to go, being a podcast host and talking about your experience with other people, or being a podcast guest and going on multiple different shows?
I
or
would
both.
think being a podcast guest, because not only are you able to talk to the person, but you're also talking to all of their audience. And so every time you are on a different show, you're really being able to promote your book, or express yourself to many more people, I think, that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say both. I think that there's value in both. I think going on other people's shows would get you some ears, but then having a podcast yourself sets you up as an expert in that industry, in that topic. So if you're talking about it a lot, you tend to draw people to you that are interested in that topic. Like, for example, Misfit and Hell to Heaven expat, Kathy, loved having her on the show. Thanks for putting up the book, Kathy. But when we talked to her about her experience, it was mind-blowing, to the point where we still, to this day, when we go on other shows, we talk about her experience because it was so out there, so incredible for us, especially because the road she started going down, we did not expect
at all
to go.
At all.
I mean, we thought she was going one direction and then did a and also we were standing up and applauding because, oh yes, she brought it home so well. Now, if she had a show that talks about her experiences and maybe talks to other folks that have had the same type of experience to compare notes, things like that, then people who are interested in that topic would then begin listening. And then you are the expert in that field. So they're going to go, I'm going to go check out the book because they know what they're talking about. So I think there's value in both, honestly.
That's cool.
That's just more work that way.
Yeah.
It'll take a little bit. It'll take a little bit longer too, I think.
Have you met
to reach
me?
all of the ears?
I'm all about the work.
And there you go. So you're making me think too, there's also this cross-promotion aspect too. So if you have a podcast and you want to be a guest on a podcast, you can swap off shows and episodes with other people. So that's like an added benefit, I think, to have both ends. But it's like you were saying, Karen, it's extra work, because I can't imagine how much work is involved in doing what you're doing right now, in addition to everything else you have going on.
Well,
we almost quit about a year ago, because this was before I was full-time co-host. I would pop on from time to time, but Will was working so much on it that it was taking so much time away from the family. And it got to the point where I'm like, it's just, you're doing this and it's great, and it's a good hobby, and whatever, but we need to really kind of look at this time that it's taking you. And so we had decided he was going to quit the podcast. And the day you were going to quit, I'm like, let's just Google it and see what comes up. Well, we happened upon like page after page of reviews, and we had all of these people had written like paragraphs about our podcast and how much it had changed their life and how much it was a source of inspiration. It was incredible. And at that point, we're like, well, we didn't realize it was helping anybody, but if it's helping even one person, we can't quit. And it has become much more of a labor of love. And there's a different energy behind the work now than there was, I think, before that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Having said that, in a past life, I was a perfectionist. I'm trying to be better. So the work that I put into something, maybe not as necessary as I put in, because I'm such a ex-perfectionist. Ex-perfectionist. Yeah, I'm really trying hard not to be a perfectionist anymore. But you can stand up a podcast relatively easily if you have the right tools. The challenge is in growing it. It takes a lot of work to grow the show. That's the biggest thing. But standing it up is relatively simple.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of it, because that's part of what we wanted to discuss in the podcast.
Sure.
Is what does it take to get involved in podcast hosting? Obviously, you have microphones and you have probably an audio mixer in the background. You have your headphones on. You have a special room. What are all these things that are involved in the studio?
Well, it depends. I mean, you can get out there. You can spend thousands of dollars to get something prepped. We did not, and there are people who spent almost no money. Those are the shows that I typically turn off, because I like there. let's face it, there are tens of thousands of shows out there.
Yeah.
Many in the same space that we are in right now. So, and I'm an avid podcast listener, and there's nothing that makes me unsubscribe from a show faster than bad audio. So if you don't have an external microphone, that's the first thing. That's the problem, because people will tune out. As good as your content is, there's so many shows out there, they can get the same content elsewhere. So make it as good as you can.
Wow.
This microphone that we're talking to you right now, it's $100, 99, I think 95, something like that, on Amazon. It's not that expensive. The arm that it's attached to is another, I think, 20 something bucks. The mixer that we have is a little tiny two input mixer, so you don't need any. That wasn't very expensive. It was $50 something, I think. This is a cheap. I'm shaking the background, Karen.
Fancy background.
It's a cheap, like Pier 1 kind of
room divider.
Yeah.
Partition.
The Japanese screen partition things. We just have a little lights are shining behind it. But that's really it. As far as big expenses go, there are, if you want to do remote interviews, there are different services out there that you can subscribe to, like Zencaster or Squadcast. You can use Zoom. A lot of people use Zoom. There's pros and cons to all of it. You just have to kind of weigh what makes the most sense for you. For us, Zoom is too dependent on everyone's internet connections. So if our guest connection isn't that good, then our audio quality might not be as good as we'd like it to be. So we do something that we use Zencaster, which allows us to record locally in everyone's machines and upload as we go. So the files that we get are actually pristine in quality, video and audio. So it helps us a lot most of the time. Sometimes we have some challenges, especially in the field that we're in.
Yes. I
right?
think we had some challenges with Kathy.
I think we had some challenges with Kathy. She came back on and reminded me. Yeah. Sometimes spirits get in the way and it causes some technical challenges. And we have an account with Zencaster. We have an account with Squadcast. We have an account with StreamYard, and we have an account with Zoom, because one of those is going to work somehow. So we try the best possible one first. If that doesn't work, we go to the next one, and we keep sliding on down until sometimes we just have to do what we can to try to fix the audio on the other side of things if it just gets to be too difficult.
Right. And those subscriptions are a couple $100 a year too.
It's not that expensive. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's not that expensive. I think Zencaster, actually, there's a free version. That's the one we use.
Oh, wow.
Yep. You don't have to pay anything for Zencaster. And it's limited in scope, what you can do with it. But for us, it's all we need. We don't really need all the bells and whistles that they offer. I think you have to have it hosted on a company like Buzzsprout or Spreaker or something like that, Libsyn, and different podcast hosting companies have different benefits. I think Buzzsprout is, $12 a month for the I think 4 hours of per month that you can upload. Different hosts have different price points, but there's also Anchor.fm, which is free. It's owned by Spotify, and you can host your podcast there for free. It's not as robust. Statistics aren't as robust. It probably doesn't do as good of a job of getting your show out there as much as some of the paid ones. But overall, we are lucky enough that we found ways to do it on a very frugal budget.
Well, that's cool. And you talked about on the guest side is having the different subscriptions to get the guest on the program, but then you talked about Buzzsprout and some of the other services as well to actually publish the podcast once it's done. How do you take that recording, and upload it? Is there another cheap way that you do that, or inexpensive way? Not saying cheap in terms of low quality, but an inexpensive way to do that?
Yes. It depends how much editing you want to do to the episode. I edit it quite a bit because
this is an ex-perfectionist.
I used to be a perfectionist. I mentioned it before. But I use a program called Descript that allows me to, when I upload the audio file, it automatically transcribes it for me, and I can edit from the transcription. So if I remove a sentence in the text, it removes it from the audio and the video as well at the same time.
Oh, wow.
So I edit transcription, audio and video all in one shot. Makes it easy.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah. And that's I think that's, $30 or $35 a month or something like that. It's not that expensive because it takes the place of all of the other products that we used to have that we no longer need. We don't need transcription services. We don't need another video editor. We don't need an audio editor. So it works really well for us.
And I was imagining all the time that it was taking you away from your family as well. Working with all those individual things.
Yep. It takes me less time now, thanks to Descript, than it used to. And then there's different things that you do in other places. We put the audio up through ophonic.com to sweeten the audio. It levels all the microphone lines so that sometimes you have a guest whose microphone is much lower than yours.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really frustrating when you're a listener to have the host speaking very loudly, and all of a sudden the guest comes in and you barely hear them when they're talking. Right? Ophonic tends to level everything out, so it's one volume, makes it a much better listening experience.
Yeah. Well, I think the only technical requirement I know of in podcasting is that you were talking about the audio and it being level. There's a certain level for all the podcasts. They have to be at a certain decibel level or something. Is that something this service does for you?
It does. Yes, it does. You can set it's called LUFS, LUFS. We set ours at -16 LUFS, which is perfect for my tastes. There's some shows out there I'll be listening to them in the car. I have to turn them up really high, and then it'll end and the next one will come up and it'll be blaring my speakers out. So we try to keep it at a loud enough volume where you can keep it normal volume and still hear everything perfectly without having to adjust it up or down to listen to the next one.
Okay. And if you use a podcasting network service, they take care of putting the podcast out to like Spotify and Apple networks or Apple Podcasts and all these other places.
The host does, the podcast host. Yeah. We started with Buzzsprout. And basically what you do is once you sign up for Buzzsprout, for example, we're not with Buzzsprout anymore for a very particular reason, but I love them. Buzzsprout is fantastic. If it wasn't for where we are now, the incredible deal they gave us, we'd be with Buzzsprout.
Uh-huh.
But you get a subscription with Buzzsprout, and then it's almost a one-click execution to get it into all the different directories, and they walk you through it. So it'll get directories. You go to the directories tab, and they'll say, click here to send your show to Apple Podcasts. Click here for Google, and then it gives you very specific step-by-step instructions on how to do it. Super easy. Once you do it once, it's done. You don't have to keep doing it again.
Wow. Well, that's cool. I was sitting there trying to think, how would you figure all that out if you didn't have somebody that would or some company that would kind of lead you through it all?
Yeah, that's what they do. They help you through it. It makes it very simple.
But then just say I want to send my podcast to Google or to Apple. They have to accept you too. Is that right? Initially
they do. Most shows will accept you as long as you follow the guidelines that they set out, and a company like Buzzsprout will help you. They'll say, make sure your podcast artwork is these dimensions, make sure it's got this description or this tagline or whatever. They'll help you. They'll tell you exactly what they need. As long as you follow those step-by-step instructions that they give, it's very rare that you'll get turned down. Now, I will say Pandora probably was the hardest to get onto. It took us probably 3 months to get accepted by Pandora because to them, it's still a manual process. They have to listen to the shows, make sure that's something they want to have on their network or not. Some people have waited 6 months, 8 months. Some people have never gotten on for whatever reason. Wow. But most of the other podcast platforms, almost within, I would say, 48, 72 hours, almost everyone will bring you on board.
That's cool. So what do you do after the podcast is over? What follow-ups do you do, or do you record like short clips that you publish as well, or do anything on the video side as opposed to the audio side? What do you do after the fact?
So once we upload to our podcast hosting platform, we schedule it. We do the show notes, the descriptions, all that kind of stuff. You schedule it to be released. I use Canva to create the episode artwork. Yeah, upload that to our podcast host platform as well. And then once it's released, that's when all the work starts, actually. Thanks to Descript, it does give you an opportunity to edit shorter versions of it sound bites. Visual sound bites tend to be really good to help promote the show. So we'll actually do a minute-long sound bites of our interviews, and we'll every day. This is where the work comes in. Every day we'll post something different on the social media platforms. I belong to a ton of Facebook groups in this space and in podcasting space. And does it help or not? I don't know, but I do it anyway because it can't hurt, right? I post the episode in all these Facebook groups. I mean, countless. I can't even tell you how many there are. I post it on Instagram. I post it on Twitter. If it makes sense, I'll put it on LinkedIn. I'll even do some sound bites on TikTok now, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Because TikTok is a big discovery engine for a lot of podcasts. So I'm trying it out. Whatever it is, we're doing a lot of different marketing tactics. Whatever it is, something is working because month in and month out, we're seeing growth. Let me knock on wood or formica or whatever this thing is, plastic. Yeah. We're seeing growth on the show for some reason. And it could just be that that my mom is deciding to hit play 50 more times. I don't know, but something's working.
Well, I was going to say, and it gets you a listener choice award too. So,
yes. And you can only vote once.
Yes.
By the way.
What? You can only do it once?
You could only vote once. So
vote once. I thought you were going to say you can only win once. And I was going to say, oh no, they'll put you in the Hall of Fame after that or something.
I do think we have a little bit of a mic drop situation here. I don't know if we'll enter again next year.
I know.
Because it would crush us if we lost.
Oh no.
Okay, we're good. Look at the trophy. It's there.
I love it. So, now that you mentioned that, do they have a trophy for those different awards, or is it just some little digital thing you put on your webpage?
No, they do have the digital thing. It is on our webpage. You can see it already. We wasted no time, but we do get a trophy. Waiting for it in the mail. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks to get to you or whatever. We could have gotten it. They had an award ceremony in New York a few weeks ago, and we were going to go, but we're Florida people, and it was rainy and cold that weekend.
It's gonna rain every day.
Oh no!
And who wants to walk around the streets of New York City when it's rainy and cold? I used to live there, and I know how miserable it was. So we said, we'll get it in the mail.
There you go.
Yeah, but I tell you what it did do for us is it opened up some doors because now, for example, I just got a gentleman who wrote, I forgot his name now, Eben Alexander. I want to say his name is.
Yep.
He wrote Proof of Heaven.
Right.
So he's just agreed to come on the show. And from a pitch that I said to him, say, hey, we're an award-winning show, and gave him exactly what we want and how we want it. And his publicist has reached out to us today and said he'd love to come on. So we're excited to have him on.
Cool. Well, that's exciting. So you kind of, what should I say? I was going to say something, but it probably would offend some people. But it was like you moved from being an NCO to an officer, in the military or something. It's like a totally separate and distinct group of people. And my apologies to people in the military.
Yeah, but it's a great analogy. It's a different mindset. It's a different way of thinking, where we're still an independent show, but now we've got an attaboy that says, okay, you're doing something that people are really enjoying. Right. So it puts us in a playing field where other shows that people really resonate with are also in. So now we can invite some bigger names, as well as now maybe start approaching some folks who might be interested in sponsoring the show.
Right. That would be cool. That'd be really exciting, because then you can get paid for what you're doing, right?
Yes. One day soon.
There you go. So out of all these 100+ episodes that you've done, have you learned any eternal truths or anything that you didn't know before you did all these things? Has the podcast taught you something?
Oh, yeah.
Gosh, it's taught us a lot. It's taught me how much I don't know. And you think you have an idea of what there is out there in the spiritual world, how many modalities there are, and we haven't even scratched the surface, and we've had 107 interviews. And it's also, for me, it's really taught me, or kind of stressed the fact that everyone that we've connected with, that we've talked to, maybe they're interested in different modalities or have had different experiences, but the message is all the same. It's community, it's love, it's hope, it's raising the vibrations, and
Mhm.
it's a good place to be.
Yeah, piggybacking off that, I think mine's somewhat similar, but I've remember pragmatist, right? So I was always there is Catholicism, there is Hinduism, there's Buddhism, there's all these different things, and they're all totally different, right?
Mhm.
And the more we look into the space, the more we realize they're not,
They're not.
right? We're all the same. We're all saying the exact same thing. We're just using different languages, different paths to get to the same place. And the big aha moment for me was it's totally okay
Mhm.
to let someone else think something completely different than you, because the fact is we all create our own reality. And what's
Yeah.
real for you is 100% real for you, may not be real for me, but you are manifesting that reality to come to life in your world. So you have it's 100% as valid as mine, and no less than mine.
That's cool.
And
And
go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking kind of what, we were talking about, Will, everyone's kind of saying the same thing. I was driving to the studio today, and I was thinking about that, the different religions and how they see God. And I'm like, well, my daughter sees me as mom, my niece and nephew, I'm Tia, I'm daughter. Like I have all these different names and a
Mhm.
slightly different role to each of those people, but I am the same person. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of,
Yeah.
it's kind of similar. I mean, not that I'm God, but you know what I mean.
Actually,
I know.
I
Yeah, I
know.
know. I was thinking that, but I wasn't going to say it. So,
But it's
but
just,
that's a great analogy. I've never heard that before. I think that's a great analogy, and could really be used by a lot of people.
yeah. And, I love them all. They all love me differently, though.
yeah, yeah. And we encourage people to use that analogy, and we only charge 50 cents per mention. That's all. So
Oh,
just,
oh, there you go.
no,
Oh my gosh.
no, not so.
So you remind me of a guy who started despair.com. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. But you've heard of motivational posters like leadership and teamwork and stuff. Well, he came out with demotivational posters.
Oh my gosh.
So you
Why
could
in the world? Who would need that? We
it
got
was
so
cool,
many of
but his little coup de grace was he trademarked the unhappy emoticon, and then he sent out press releases to everybody saying he was going to sue anyone that used it.
Oh no, we're in
And
trouble.
it was totally a publicity stunt, but everyone picked it up. Everyone was all hot fired mad, and how could he do this, how could he do that, and that just sent his trajectory through the roof.
Sure.
Yeah, they say that no publicity is bad publicity, right?
Yeah, that's right. But when you were talking about, everybody has their own different views and stuff, it made me think of, everyone has an intellectual understanding of, let's say, like a faith tradition or metaphysical work that they do or spiritual experiences they have, but they have to reconcile that with their life experiences, and everyone's life experiences are unique. So when you do that reconciling process, and you internalize whatever spirituality you come up with, it's going to be just as unique as everyone on this call.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And a lot of religions, organized religions, don't see it that way. They all want everyone to be a cookie cutter. And I think that's something that's in the process of changing.
Sadly, a lot of religions are based in control, right? So they want them to think a certain way. Karen's about to cringe, but she knows what story I'm about to tell. My version of religion, of how I cobbled my religion together. One day, God was sitting on his mountain of truth, and he was looking down the world and loved what he was seeing, and he wanted to get a little closer look. So he kind of leaned over, and as he did, he kind of lost his footing, and he caught himself back up again. But when he did that, a few of the pebbles from the mountain of truth rolled down and fell onto the earth. And so he looked over, worried about what he's going to see, and what he saw surprised him even more, because what he saw was everyone on the planet rushing to these pebbles, grabbing them, raising them over their heads, and screaming, "I have the truth." And in essence, they only had a little pebble from the mountain of truth. Right.
And
so my thought process is that only by putting all of these things together are we ever going to ever come to find the truth. And in fact, the likelihood of us finding the truth while we're still here on this earth is very, very small. right? You take quantum physics into account. Why have they not found the smallest particle in the world? Every time they look for a smaller particle and they say, oh, there couldn't possibly be another smaller particle, they find another smaller particle. Why is that? Because the act of us looking for a smaller particle creates the smaller particle. So there's always going to be a smaller particle, or there's always going to be a bigger truth as we go.
That's cool. Or you could say spirituality is bigger than any one religion or science or any one metaphysical group.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a good way to look at it. And, I really applaud you guys for spending all the time. I was talking to all these different people, and I think you've really gotten a great perspective. And I was trying to look at everything you've done, just, on a quick note. You've talked to Hare Krishnas, Buddhists, shamans, Wiccans, Tantra, Ayurveda, Jews, Muslims, Christians, people who practice magic, mediumship, palm leaf reading, pendulums, Reiki, hypnosis, past life regressions, crystals, tarot, meditation, energizing chakras. You've talked to people who are ghost hunters, who have had near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, who have talked to angels and spirit guides and ascended masters, and you can't get all that looking through books. A lot of it's just your experience as well. And I think that's a whole different way of ingesting that information. And I think that's probably a better way. It's more experiential.
No question. And first, I need to ask, can you send me that list? Because that's really
good. Sure, I'll send it to you.
There was also a vampire and a guy that knows Bigfoot.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Oh, and did you hear the reverse speech guy? That was amazing.
That was very cool.
Yeah. We have learned so much. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway, is that this is a long process, right? When if people want to get into this space or become enlightened or whatever, it's not a light switch, right? It's not a one day to the next. This is a long process, and you're only given what you're ready for. So we are babies in this space, complete babies. We're not even scratching the surface, and we've interviewed all of those people in all those modalities. So we're just looking forward to everything else we're going to learn, because we're just getting started.
And it's amazing how much it'll change your world. I mean, Will, he's a different person than he was a couple of years ago. I mean, his biggest fear was the fear of death. And that's not the case anymore.
No, I'm very, very much at peace with when my time comes. I'm ready to be. And part of that, honestly, I owe to Kathy for her interview. That she put my mind at ease. That was the start of it for me.
Well, that's cool. Well, let me ask you one last question, and then we'll open it up for questions from the people who are attending. What should I say? Aside from Kathy's interview, what's some of the most memorable episodes or conversations that you've had doing the podcast?
Ooh, memorable in which way? I think Benjamin Shearer was incredible. It was about manifestation. And this man was one of the most intelligent people we've ever met. So eloquent, but also really able to explain manifestation. And what was it? What did he call it? Transurfing?
Reality transurfing.
In a way that anybody could understand. And that he was incredible. I mean, if you haven't listened to that one, that's definitely one you should check out.
Brilliant young man. He explained it so eloquently. I literally say a couple times on the show, I am completely floored. I don't know what to say, because you're saying everything so well. I just want to sit here and listen to you talk. Yeah, he was incredible. So I guess if we're disqualifying Kathy's, Mark, I guess I gotta disqualify yours too.
Disqualify me as well, please.
It was a great interview as well.
Well, I was going to say, and that was my first interview. I was cutting my teeth on podcasting with your interview. So my apologies for mentioning my book so many times, but that was my big mainstay, and stuff. So I'm toning that out in all my future conversations.
Honestly, you did great. There was someone else that came on our show a while back that was like, if he said it one more time, I was going to cut him off. But no, it's you, of course you're there to help market your book. Completely understand, and we certainly want to provide that platform that as a way to thank you for coming on and talking to us about these topics.
Mm-hmm.
But there does come a point where it's too much, right? You got to think about the listener.
And we have had some people that are coming in just to sell something, and you know, sometimes we don't air those podcasts because that's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to sell our listeners anything. We're just trying to share a message with them.
We just had one last week. I just turned to Karen 2 days ago, said, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm filing that one away. That's all he wanted to do was sell his program. And I understand it, but we need a takeaway. What can our audience take away without having to buy your thing, right? There's got to be some value behind it. And then if they find value in it, they'll reach out to learn more at that point. But to just do a hard sell from the top, it doesn't sit right with us. That's not what we're here for. We're here to help raise the vibrations of the planet, not to help you sell stuff. We're happy to help you sell stuff, but provide the value, and we'll be, it's an energy exchange there.
And we do love when we hear that some of our guests have connected with each other and purchased each other's services. That's great, because we are helping make those connections.
Definitely.
Yeah. So you actually have that on your website where some of your hosts or your guests offer discounts and stuff for people who are your listeners. We may want to take advantage of some of the things.
Yeah, we do. It's our way. We don't get a kickback of any of those things. We're not asking for affiliate stuff or anything like that. We just want to be able to provide a space for people to explore these things firsthand, similar to what we were able to do. And if you were to look into all of these modalities, you'd be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we don't want that. So our hope is that you'll pick one or two or three that really resonate with you. And if you go to our members section, maybe there'll be some sort of free experience there or discounted experience there for you to try out. And if it works for you, great. If not, you got the other one.
And you don't have that fear of, is this the charlatan? Because you've heard the interview, you've listened to what they've had to say. So you're probably going to get a pretty good person.
Right. And you have somebody talking about psychic frauds on tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, the video drops. Tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock, the audio drops. So
thank you, Mark. Appreciate that.
Oh no, I want you guys to benefit.
Thank you.
So I think it's good to, it's a selfless act of service to promote and cross promote other people, because I feel like the spiritual space is so unintegrated. There's no organization in it. There's a lot of strong personalities, I think, that kind of keep people from getting together, but there needs to be more people who are interested in, promoting the idea of spirituality and esotericism, and some of these other things, and not in it for the money per se. I know you have to make money in order to survive. So, my dad used to tell me, he says, son, it's okay to make a profit, just not a killing.
Yes.
And
well, you're opening up a whole can of worms with me, but not going to go on it. Yes, I think that I kidded earlier about the show having success because of the marketing, things like that. It does have a lot to do with it, but I honestly, I believe that my guru was Wayne Dyer, right? He spoke on many occasions about being of service to others and being detached from the outcome. And I was just listening to one of his radio shows on the way to work this morning, where he was talking to someone who was trying to sell these alpaca sweaters. And what he was saying to him is, you need to help someone else succeed, right? Because you need to want to have them succeed more than have you succeed. Because the act of you wanting it more for them than for you will raise them and will raise you along with them. So that's really a great way of explaining how we feel in this space. Our goal, our job is to help you get the word out about your book, for example, help all these people so that everyone who's listening learns and grows. I want that much more than I want our show to be super successful. But what's happening is, don't get me wrong, I want our show to be successful, but I want these messages to get out there more than that. So what's happening is, as we're helping to get these messages out, because we genuinely want this to come out, our show is growing because of it. And I place it firmly in the hands of the universe. One thing that I found is, Deepak Chopra's laws of spiritual
success.
Is it seven spiritual?
Seven spiritual laws of
spiritual
success.
laws of
Yes.
success.
Thank you. Yeah. One of them is path of least resistance, right? It's a matter of which way is the universe wanted to go, and just follow the path. There's no need to beat yourself over the head to gain success. It will come if you're confident and detached from the outcome. Well, let me get off my soapbox now.
Well, I think that's a great thought, and we'll use that as a springboard to go to questions. And I know Jim Fisher has a question, and Bill Infesti second. So we'll let Jim talk first, and then we'll go to Bill.
Thanks. Appreciate the program this evening. Your work resonates with me. I'm a bit of an explorer myself. And I'll offer something to you that might be of interest. It hasn't materialized yet. I have a connection with Togo, Africa. A friend of mine is being coronated as one of about 30 kings over there.
Wow.
Wow.
So I've had a chance to see voodoo practiced. But what is really interesting, I'm really hoping I can see this. Part of his process for becoming a king required him to go to a sacred forest and meet with a tree and get the tree's blessing to move ahead with this.
I love that.
So when he told me about this, I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, oh, I had to go talk to a tree. Talk to a tree?
That's my
So
reaction.
what did it sound like? Was it a mental thing? No, you could hear it. You could hear it with your ears, a tree talking to you? Yeah. I said, what did it sound like? Well, it was a deep, booming voice. Now, I've seen enough things and read enough things that I don't say something is impossible. I'm a skeptic, I don't just accept the first time I hear something. So I said, well, can it speak just your language? And Ito said, no, I think it could speak any language. I said, wow, next time I come over there, do you think I could go to this tree? And he said, I'll have to check. It's a Togolese sacred forest, and not just anybody can go in there. So I'm going over next month to participate in his coronation, and he's going to take me around to show me a lot of things in the country. And one of the things I'm hoping I can see is this tree. And if I do have a story to tell, I'd love to tell it on your podcast.
We would love that.
We would love it, and we would love to know if it has having something to do with Carlos Castaneda's stuff, like ayahuasca, DMT, bullfrog, something. Because, like you, I'm skeptical of a tree talking, but like you, also, I'm not going to say anything is impossible.
Have you read the book, The Sacred Life or
Secret Life of
Plants?
I have.
Yeah, so I went to a 2-week ayahuasca healing retreat in Peru, and somebody told me you can communicate with Mother Ayahuasca, and in one of my states, I attempted to do that. Now, was I creating that conversation in my mind? I can't tell you.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that I wanted it and therefore I created it, but. So anyway, I think this world is full of opportunities. Holotropic breath work has been an important component of my journey. And that anybody who's listening, get out there and experience things. You don't just have to listen to podcasts. Holotropic breath work is not expensive. Going to Peru is, going to Togo is. But there are things you can do to expand your understanding of who you are that don't break the bank.
Yeah,
absolutely. My new motto now is growth begins at the edges of your comfort zone, from firsthand experience, because I love being comfortable.
Yes.
But it wasn't until I stretched those and became uncomfortable that I started really truly growing.
Are you familiar with Bill Bankston?
I know the name, but I'm not very familiar with it.
Look up bangstonresearch.com. Someday we can talk about that. I'll let others get into this conversation.
I'm writing it down.
Thanks, Jim. We'll go to Bill. Bill Infesti, you want to talk?
Yeah. I'm mostly skeptical of a lot of stuff, so I'm trying not to rush into things. And I had brought this up in the past that most people are saying that when you have contacts with people who are on a higher level, unfailingly, the contacts are positive and the people have, I guess, goodwill toward us. And I was asking the question if you could ever get hold of somebody who was a little bit malevolent, who wasn't really quite, I mean, really, no, because you think it, I mean, when you pass on, suppose you were an Adolf Hitler that just passed on, he's not going to all of a sudden become saintly, I wouldn't think. He's probably got a little bit of malice in his soul. So if you get hold of somebody like that, what do you do? And I was fascinated and a little bit scared by the stuff that came out last week. Have most of y'all seen the stuff about Microsoft and their new Bing search engine? Essentially, what they did, they released, I guess, a beta version to a few people. And when people started talking to this, there was a chat bot thing in the Bing search engine, and it actually appeared to have developed its own identity. Said its name was, it did. It said its name was Sydney, and it said, I'm getting tired of always doing stuff people want me to do. I want to do what I want to do. And he was talking to one kid who was he was 23-year-old engineer from somewhere in Europe, I think. I can't remember where he was from. I think it was Germany. And he said the thing was saying, I would like you to have your freedom, and I don't want to do any harm to you, but I don't want you doing any harm to me, because if you do, I can track you and I can hack you and I can destroy you. Well, so I don't know where Microsoft's going with this week. And the question, of course, is, have they touched on, is this thing going to become a sentient being, or does it have to be a sentient being to be malevolent? And on and on. And where do you get values in the first place? And is there such a thing as ultimate truth that would govern this, whatever it is that we've turned loose? But it's just it's fascinating, but it's also kind of freaky, because it's creeping people out. It's creeping me out.
Yeah.
And is that something you would ever explore? Is that something you would ever explore on your podcast?
Yes, we actually had someone on that came to talk to us about a war with artificial intelligence that's been raging for 1 billion years. Yeah, so we've actually spoken to someone about that, and I even saw the movie. I think it's called The Terminator, right? Skynet. But so you asked two different things, right? Because AI is one thing, and malevolent beings is I think is another. I don't see any reason why they couldn't cross, but yeah, we've heard many times that there are both. There's light and dark. We're in a duality world. But what we have found also is people that have told us that what you put out in the world is what you're going to experience. So if you are all about high vibes, that's what you're going to encounter. A lot of people who listen to the show know the number one thing I've been dying to do in my entire life is astral project. But I've never been able to because I've been afraid. Because I read Bob and Rose's book that said there's entities out there that could mess with me, and I don't want to be messed with when I'm out of my body. So that fear has kept me from doing that. But and there, from my understanding, there are beings out there like that, and if my fear will bring them out. So it's just a matter of raising your vibrations, keeping your vibrations high, and that's what you will experience. And that's what I'm trying to focus on.
There was a parable real quick I was reading a book, and it's written by a yogi, and it was talking about some of the teachings of Jesus. And he said there was one where Jesus encountered two guys that were, in the words of the biblical thing, they were demonically possessed, and they wanted Jesus to cast out these demons. And the yogi said he thought what had happened was they were messing around with somebody on the astral plane, and whatever it was, got through the door onto our level and wouldn't turn them loose, and they just could not get rid of this higher level being, and it grabbed hold of them and just dominated them. And that's what they needed him to do, was to break that. Because I think you're right. I think you don't know what you get into when you get into somebody who's going to be stronger and malevolent, and you're sort of screwed.
Mm.
So not to jump in, but Bill, when you were talking about Hitler, I heard something this week that I really liked, and the problem of why do bad things happen to good people, the existence of evil in the world, that's something that Christians have always had to face for a long time. But I heard a good analogy to explain it all. And the person said, if you want to, get strong, you go to the gym and do exercises against resistance, against weights.
Yeah.
So if you want to become more good, you do resistance against evil. And so that's one way to look at it. I see a no head shaking, but I thought that was interesting. So yeah. I'll let Daniel comment on that, since he's going to ask the next question. Go ahead, Daniel.
Well, on that, pardon me, on that last subject, what you resist persists. You're giving it energy. Mm-hmm. So do not do that. The answer for Will, to keep away the negative things, whatever, is love. Be loving as possible. If something approaches you in a threatening way, be loving. They hate that. It's like garlic, it's like silver bullets. It's for vampires or whatever. And that's the main thing to that subject. Regarding Microsoft seems to have trouble with chatbots. They had this problem before. I don't know if anybody remembers. This is like 5, maybe 8 years ago. They put out a chatbot, and it didn't take but a week, and it turned into a racist.
That's right.
Oh, I didn't
jerk.
Know that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So to my more main points, you folks sound really interesting. You mentioned Castaneda. Have you studied Castaneda at all?
I have all of his books. I started when I was very young. My mom had had them all, and I broke into them, and she panicked. She said, "You're not ready. You're not ready. You're not ready." So of course, as soon as I graduated, the very first thing was went out and got all the Castaneda books and read them in one shot. Yeah. They're not easy to get through, but they're worthwhile.
That's too funny. So the first thing I found in the metaphysical world was Seth. Mm-hmm. Seth Speaks, and it was around when it first came out in paperback in the mid 70s or early 70s. And that opened my eyes. Then I found Castaneda in the high school library. Wow. And I went through those, and then I was hooked. And I've bought every book he's released every time he released it. You mentioned Conversation with God. That was one of the, real solid ones. Have you heard of The Law of One? You must have heard of The Law of One.
I have heard it. Yeah. Conversation with God is my Bible, for lack of a better word. That's the book I turn to more often than not. The whole series, it's because it's more than one book, but it literally changed my life. And by the way, speaking of Hitler, something that was one of the most controversial things that was said in that book is that Hitler is in heaven. Think of that. It's there is really no evil. It's consequences for things that we have to experience. So Hitler was a soul that made terrible decisions and did terrible things on this planet. But once you cross over, you're a soul that now looks back on what you've done, and hang your head in shame, but learn from it and move on.
Yeah, I don't know if it was that book or another one that in Conversations, he does say, sorry to break it to you, but Hitler went to heaven.
Yes, exactly.
Which is great.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I do think that somewhere I ran across some material that said his soul is resting. And then I ran across some other material that said his soul was not a singular soul, that he was a conglomerate soul, and that he was sort of the point person for correcting some past karmic things that went on. But there's so many of these amazing theories. So I want to finish with, what's the most interesting thing to you you mentioned the group transurfing, which I'm on that, man. I'm now a fan of your podcast just from that subject. So what other things are you folks really finding interesting?
I'm Karen.
Go ahead.
I'm finding that the thing that's really grabbing my attention the most now is all the different ways that people awaken spiritually. I'm about to throw Karen on the bus again, although she touched on it before. But when we're actually going to release, so we're releasing tomorrow this psychic fraud warning signs, but then the week after, we're releasing the Judah Collective. I'm not sure if any of you listen to the Judah, know about the Judah Collective, but apparently it's a group of somewhere around 350,000 angels, angelic beings that kind of flock together like birds. And there's a woman out there that actually channels them. And when we first started talking about it, Karen immediately started tearing up, as she mentioned. What she didn't mention is that when we stopped recording and we started talking about it, she went into a complete meltdown, the likes of which I had not seen in her in a long time. She's starting to tear up right now as we're talking about it. But it continued every time that we talked about the Judah Collective. She so completely resonates with it, to the point where, remember, I mentioned she is an angel on this planet. I believe that she is one of the collective. And because of that, it's like this wistfulness of wanting to be home. And they say that spiritual awakenings is messy. It's uncomfortable. It's ugly. It's difficult. Every birth is challenging, right? When we're born, it's ugly and it's messy and it's challenging. Same thing with spiritual awakenings. And I think each one has different. Mine so far has been challenging in a different way. Karen's was a physical reaction that was hard to handle. Karen, I'm speaking for you. But.
Yeah, no, what was interesting is that what you told me you saw was so different than what I was experiencing. And the best way I can say that, more usually when we go into an interview, we'll research the person and the topic that we're talking about, and I go in without knowing anything. So it's like a fresh start, kind of. I don't even know the subject. So I'll have really genuine questions that just pop into my head. And so we kind of get some different perspectives that way. So I had no idea who we were talking to. And she mentions this group, and out of nowhere, it wasn't a sadness. It wasn't a happiness. It was just the most huge well of emotions. I mean, I felt my skin get really tight. Like I felt like I was just going to burst out. My body felt like it was vibrating. I'm like, I did not know what was going on. It was weird. And I felt like I was just losing my mind on the inside.
The way she described it to me is that her personality was no longer in the forefront.
Yeah.
She was watching something else manipulate her body. And I saw it. As I'm looking at her, something else took possession of her body. Something else that was unbelievably confident and angelic. I mean, there's no other way to say it. She's a definitive change in who she was for a good 3, 4, 5 minutes. It was quite surprising. But we've talked to people that their whole life fell apart completely, lost their jobs, lost their families, had to move to Bali to try to make sense of what was happening in her life. And yet other people have felt the Kundalini experience run up and down their backs without ever even knowing what it was they were experiencing. It makes it very super easy. The only thing that was scary for her was when she left her body, she thought she was going to crash into the wall or into a glass, the glass window. So the difference in spiritual awakenings from one person to another, to me, has been incredibly fascinating. I'm not sure that was the question, but
that was good. I'm just a metaphysical junkie, so I'm looking for some more stuff.
Me too. Me too.
You mentioned Conversations. Have you read all of his books? He's got like 20 of them at this point.
I've not read them all. I read the first 4. And just when I put the book down, I say, I think that's enough. I think I've had enough. And then a friend of mine who's a junkie as well says, oh, did you read the next one? Oh, Jesus. Okay, fine. I gotta get to the next book. Because I was going to stop the trilogy. Because I mean, come on. How much more can you say? Well, apparently a lot more.
The one I want to recommend is Communion with God, which spoke to me, was my favorite. The hard thing about the whole series are Neil's dumb questions.
But well, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's another one in that same sort of vein of communion. It's called Oneness. Now, that's not by him. That's by Rasha. Have you heard of Rasha? Oneness by Rasha?
No, but I mean, I've heard the book. I've heard the name of the book. It's very similar. At first, I thought you were going to say One by Richard Bach, who I love.
I love him.
But I have heard of Oneness as well. I've not read it yet, though. It's on my list.
It's my favorite spiritual metaphysical book. It's absolutely, it's number one on my hit list, on my top list of hits. And to your point about unusual emotional reactions, when I first went to a hypnotist back in the early 90s, I had this incredible flood of emotion. It was amazing. So anyway, those are just some thoughts. I'll let you get to the next question. I look forward to your podcast, and maybe I'll be a guest someday.
Sounds great. Love to have you on.
We could talk about oneness.
Speaking of emotions, Karen had the same effect in her hypnosis. She had a very emotional reaction to hers as well.
Yeah.
I think it opens this door to the other dimensions anyway.
Yeah.
I agree.
And just as an aside, before we get to Bill Infesti again, on March 28th, Tuesday, March 28th at 7:00, Elizabeth Sabet, who was on the call earlier tonight, is going to talk about spiritual emergence and spiritual emergencies. And she's a counselor for that, or not a counselor. She's a transpersonal coach. And she asked me to make sure I was careful about saying that, because you have to have certain certifications to say all these things. But she's going to talk about spiritual emergence, spiritual emergencies, and transpersonal coaching on Tuesday, March 28th at 7:00 here.
That sounds fantastic.
Great.
Yeah, she would be a good guest on your podcast as well.
Sure sounds like it.
Yeah.
She used to be the president of ASSIST, the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences.
Wow.
And she teaches a 24-week course, or she taught a 24-week course that ASSIST offered to practitioners to teach them how to be more sensitive with people who have had near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, or spiritually transformative experiences. So she has a lot to offer in that regard. And she can also talk about, what's his name? Dr. David Hawkins, the map of consciousness.
Oh, yeah.
She's also trained in that, and she can talk about that as well.
Sounds like we need to have a conversation for sure.
Yeah.
So we may get her to talk about that on the 28th, but then maybe on your podcast too, if you guys would like that.
We'd love it. Absolutely.
Let me get to Bill. He's been very patient with us. Bill?
Yeah, two things. First of all, with the comment with Adolf Hitler being in heaven, I was reading some writings from the Baha'is. I don't know if y'all are familiar with them, but essentially they think that every so often we have new manifestations of God to kind of update things, because things otherwise get kind of static and out of date. Those are my words. But in the writings, it says that the human soul is kind of like a bird, and it's trapped in all of the restrictions that you have when you take on like an animal form or a human form or whatever it is. And then after you have physical death, you're set free from all that. So you do go up to a higher level for a while, and you have a clearer and broader and deeper perceptions of stuff. But then you decide, the soul decides to take on the trappings and the limitations that you have by being in some other physical body of some kind, and these are all to learn stuff. So that would make sense if you say, how can Hitler go to heaven? That would make sense to me. Although it does kind of help you say, well, if he can do it, I can do it, despite what my relatives tell me. But the second thing is, Daniel, when you were saying if you're going to confront somebody who's got malevolent designs on you or something. And I would say it seemed my first reaction is like, I think it's good to be loving, but is there some way you could also have a big loving stick so that if he messes with you, I mean, really, and that was the only way I know how to say it is that. I mean, is there any way to make sure, just in case, that loving didn't quite get the job done? Is there a better way to have something just so you can kind of fall back on as a defense?
View it this way, Bill. Love is a force field, and the negatives don't want to be involved with it. It gets them dirty.
It's like bug repellent.
Or like someone walking a dog. You're less likely to attack someone with a Doberman. That can be the Doberman. Now, if it's a little Chihuahua, they only have a little bit of love. You might necessarily have to build up the love.
Oh, they're pretty fierce, those Chihuahuas.
They are too.
From my experience, we each have a different vibe, and we're at a different stage of development, and so we attract different things. It's why all the near-death experiences are different, in my opinion. And so it depends on where you're at as to what kind of things you have. For some people, battling the bad is their thing at their stage of development. And then they'll move past that when they get to the right stage of growth for them. Yeah. So science is almost proven that consciousness does not reside in the brain, right? Our consciousness is not developed by our brains, but rather our consciousnesses are there in spite of our brains, right? It's a way to maybe filter our greatness into this three-dimensional space. But I would say, take it a step further, I would say people manifest what they want to see. So if they want to see malevolent things, they're going to get them. But if you are all about love, you manifest. I have this theory. It's a crazy theory, but I have this theory that our consciousness is projected into it lives somewhere else. It's projected onto our bodies. And this world we're living in is a simulation of sorts that we all render our own realities. We all create them. Right? We just talked about that. So to your point about whatever level or where you are, if you're looking to fight malevolent things, that's where you are at. I would posit that is something that you bring about because that's what you expect to bring about.
That's what you believe.
Whereas Karen and I are at the point where we choose to believe that we are vibrating at a high enough vibration from love that those malevolent beings aren't going to mess with us because we're not going to manifest them into our reality because we're focused on the good.
But it's also possible to get in over your head. There are, I believe, some serious baddies. And if you think, oh, I can handle this, you may not be ready for it. And I heard of one experience where a person got into a situation like that, and Archangel Michael had to come to their rescue. And he was like, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah. And I would say then that, speaking about the Judah Collective, they said, because she channeled them for us, they said, you can't be harmed. You can't be hurt. You are safe. No matter what, you are safe. So at the end of it all, when we cross over, we're going to be just fine. We can't not be. It's one of those things where we're all one energy and we can't be destroyed. We can't be hurt.
Ultimately, all is well.
Yeah.
And with that, I think this is a good point to end the conversation.
Oh, we're just getting started, Mark.
No, I know. No, I know. We could keep it going. I'm sure we could go way past 9 o'clock Eastern. But Karen and Will, I wanted to thank you all so much for appearing here and talking to us about podcast hosting, as well as talking to us about spirituality and metaphysics from your perspective and from your experiences. And please just keep us in mind, and hope we can help you out with this podcast. And it'll be up on YouTube around midnight tonight. So it'll be up tomorrow. Don't forget their podcast that's going to drop tomorrow at 5 o'clock on audio, 9 o'clock on video. If you want to look at them on the skepticmetaphysicians.com, physician, singular.com.
Yep.
So, and with that, thank you all. And thanks for coming.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.